There are roughly 5,000 species of cockroach. One of them, a thumbnail-sized insect from Hawaii, produces a substance that scientists have called one of the most nutritious foods per weight ever discovered. 3 times the calories of buffalo milk, all 9 essential amino acids, and a built-in time-release mechanism that feeds you continuously as you digest it.
And it is impossible to collect. Not difficult, not expensive, literally impossible, and the reason lies in how the substance is formed.
The substance is called cockroach milk, and what scientists found inside the gut of this insect is one of the strangest discoveries in modern biology. When the Pacific beetle cockroach Diploptera punctata, the only cockroach in the world that gives birth to live young, nurses its developing embryos, it produces a pale yellow fluid. By the time that fluid reaches the gut of each embryo, it has crystallized into tiny solid structures. Scientists describe them as looking like glitter, dense, shimmering, biologically engineered protein crystals.
That discovery started with a hunch, and what that hunch uncovered would force scientists to rethink what food can even be.
Spring 2006, a young undergraduate researcher named Nathan Cousins is working in the lab of Barbara Stay at the University of Iowa. Stay, nicknamed Cockroach Lady by her colleagues, had spent decades studying Diploptera punctata and held the largest personal collection of cockroach species in the world at the time. She had been observing crystals in these insects for years.
But what she had not yet understood was what she was looking at.
Cousins cuts open a cockroach embryo under a microscope and watches something spill out. Tiny crystals glittering, tumbling into the petri dish. His instinct, these aren't waste products, these are something else. That hunch triggered a 10-year research program spanning 3 continents, culminating in a 2016 paper published in IUCRJ, the Journal of International Union of Crystallography, that stopped the scientific community cold. The team was led by Subramanian Ramaswamy at the Institute for Stem Cell Biology and Regenerative Medicine in Bangalore, India. Using X-ray crystallography, the same family of technology used to photograph the structure of DNA, they decoded what lived inside those crystals. And here's what they found. A single crystal contains 232 kilocalories per 100 grams. For reference, buffalo milk, previously the most energy-dense animal milk on record, contains around 97 kilocalories per 100 grams. A single cup of cockroach milk would contain roughly 700 calories, more than 3 times the calories in a cup of cow's milk. The composition breaks down to roughly 45% protein, 25% carbohydrates, and 16 to 22% healthy lipids, including omega-3 fatty acids, and all 9 essential amino acids, the ones your body cannot manufacture on its own.
This is what's known as a complete protein, and very few substances in nature qualify, and none of those come close to this caloric density.
But the detail that made Ramaswamy's team stop and stare was not the calorie count, it was what the crystal does as it dissolves.
As the embryo digests protein from the outer layer of the crystal releases more nutrients to replace them, at the same rate. A self-regulating, time-released nutritional delivery system built by evolution into a structure smaller than a grain of sand.
Ramaswamy described it like this: it's time-released food. If you need food that is calorifically high, that is time-released, and food that is complete, this is it. His co-researcher, Sanchari Banerjee, who performed the crystallography analysis, was astonished by the structure itself. Crystallographers spend careers trying to grow usable protein crystals in controlled laboratory settings. Here, inside the gut of a living cockroach embryo, nature had grown them with a precision so extraordinary you could resolve individual atoms under X-ray diffraction. In her words, nature had provided us heterogeneous crystals that diffract so well that we can see the atoms they're made of.
And here's where the story turns, because the reason you cannot buy cockroach milk has nothing to do with regulation or lack of investment. The problem is biological.
Here's the extraction process. You take a pregnant Pacific beetle cockroach, you kill it, you open the abdomen without crushing it, you locate the embryos developing inside the brood sac, you dissect each embryo, and from the gut of each embryo, you harvest the milk crystals. Researcher Leonard Chavez, co-author of the 2016 paper, estimated that milking just 2 or 3 cockroaches takes about half a day of skilled laboratory work. At that rate, filling a single shot glass, about 1.5 ounces, would take on the order of 400 cockroaches, and a full gallon would require tens of thousands. By Chavez's own estimate, a gallon would mean more than 38,000 of them.
There's no milking machine. There's no non-lethal pathway. The substance forms inside the living embryo's gut, crystallizes there, and then has no route outside of the body except through dissection. Chavez stated it like this:
milking a cockroach is nothing like milking a cow. And here's the deeper irony. There are enormous cockroach farms operating right now. The largest one in China, the Good Doctor Pharmaceutical Group's facility outside Xichang in Sichuan province, raises 6 billion cockroaches per year. 6 billion. They process them for traditional medicine, cosmetics, and pharmaceutical research. But none of those insects are Diploptera punctata. None of those 6 billion animals produce a single milk crystal, because out of 5,000 cockroach species, just one, this thumbnail-sized anomaly native to Hawaii and Southeast Asia, evolved viviparity, live birth, the brood sac, the milk.
You cannot redirect that operation to milk production. You would have to start from scratch with a species no one raises commercially to produce a substance that requires killing every animal at the peak of its reproductive cycle.
There is one path forward that researchers are pursuing, and it's worth understanding because the gap between where it stands and where it needs to go is still pretty vast. Scientists have been studying whether yeast could be engineered to express the protein crystals without the insect, feeding the yeast the genetic instructions for the lily-mit proteins that give cockroach milk its structure, then harvesting the crystals from a fermentation tank instead of from embryo guts. The concept is straightforward, but the execution has defeated everyone who's tried it.
Here's the specific problem. What makes cockroach milk extraordinary is not just the ingredients, it's the crystal architecture, the time-release mechanism, the self-regulating structure.
Evolution built that architecture over hundreds of millions of years inside a living organism. The genetic sequences of the protein have been mapped, but what hasn't been solved is getting a yeast cell to assemble those proteins into a crystal that behaves the same way.
A crystal that releases nutrients at a continuous rate as it dissolves. That structure may depend on biological conditions, the temperature, the chemistry, the physical environment of a living cockroach embryo gut that a fermentation tank cannot replicate.
Nobody knows yet. Nobody has managed it, and the research is in the early stages in the most literal sense. Early stages meaning there is no demonstration that this is possible at all. Banerjee says she believes cockroach milk could help end world hunger. Think about that. Scientists have identified a complete food, protein, fat, carbohydrate, all 9 essential amino acids, more calories per gram than any known substance, that theoretically requires no cattle, no vast agricultural land, no water-intensive supply chain. They've identified it, sequenced it, imaged it down to the atomic level, but they cannot make it. They have watched the solution to one of humanity's worst problems crystallize under a microscope, glittering in the gut of an insect they cannot farm, produced through a mechanism they cannot replicate, extractable only by killing the animal one at a time with half a day of laboratory work per specimen.
But set aside the cockroach milk for a second, because the harder problem isn't biological at all. Even if you could magically bottle this stuff tomorrow, even if the yeast worked and the crystals poured out of a tank, you would still have to get a human being to put it in their mouth.
And that turns out to be the part nobody has solved. Eating bugs is not a fringe idea. The United Nations Food and Agricultural Organization has been pushing it formally since 2013, when it published a report arguing that insects are a serious answer to feeding a planet headed for 10 billion people. And the case for it is genuinely strong. Insects deliver protein with a fraction of the land, water, and feed that cattle demand, and insect farming produces a tiny share of greenhouse gas. The FAO's headline figure, insects already form part of the traditional diet of roughly 2 billion people across Asia, Africa, and Latin America, with more than 1,900 species documented as food.
The 2 billion number is probably an overestimate. No one actually walks around counting insect eaters the way governments count rice harvests.
But the direction is real. Beetles, caterpillars, crickets, grasshoppers. For a large slice of humanity, none of this is strange.
But it is strange in exactly one place, the West. And surveys reveal just how strange.
When YouGov polled Americans, only 18% said they would eat a whole insect, and only a quarter would eat food made with insect ingredients. In a separate poll of more than 37,000 US adults, most, 58%, said they were unwilling to try an insect-based dish at all, with nearly half calling themselves, quote, very unwilling.
The numbers barely move across the wealthy world. Italians, with arguably the planet's most beloved cuisine sitting right there, were among the least willing of anyone surveyed.
Researchers have a word for what they keep running into: disgust. Across study after study, it is the single most powerful predictor of refusal. Not price, not safety, not nutrition. The aversion appears to partially be a hardwired one, an evolved revulsion that once protected our ancestors from rot and parasites, now aimed squarely at a food source that is, by the numbers, cleaner and more efficient than the steak on the plate beside it.
Stacked on top of disgust is food neophobia, the simple fear of the unfamiliar, and a stubborn cultural belief documented by the researchers that eating insects is something people only do out of poverty, a last resort, a sign something has gone wrong.
There are cracks in the wall. The same research shows that the resistance is not evenly distributed. The people most willing to try are younger, more educated, more often men, and above all, people who have already eaten an insect once.
So let's put the two halves of this story together. On one side, a substance so nutritionally perfect that one of the scientists who decoded it believes it could help end world hunger.
Locked inside an animal we cannot farm and cannot replicate. On the other side, an entire category of food that we can farm cheaply and sustainably, that 2 billion people already eat without a second thought,
and that most of the wealthy world would refuse to touch on instinct. The cockroach won't give up its milk, and we won't open our mouths.
The obstacle in the end isn't only the insect's biology, some of it is ours.